very angry person?
He was a very violent and aggressive man. He used to like smash things up in the house.
What was it like in the first few days and weeks after getting married?
He was very loving, very caring, but then he had this split character.
What was that first thing that happened that shocked you after you got married?
And he turned around and he just slapped me so hard.
Why did you not tell your parents and your family about it?
There was quite often some form of abuse, whether it was physical or emotional or even just threats. Walking across the room and he'd have a drink and he'd just like throw something at me like the remote control.
What were your emotions like in those 7 years when you were with him?
I was literally scared of my own life.
Yeah.
Scared that he was going to do something to me.
What made you decide to leave?
He hit my uncle that day and he came at us with a knife, which is why we ended up leaving. But it was that much. I had to go back because I knew he wouldn't let me take my son. I just remember he was hitting me and I was lying in bed, and I was actually in bed in my son's bed with both of the kids at the time. And then the police came and the father-in-law got arrested and I got arrested. I remember there was one time his dad was telling him to swear at me, call me a bitch, call my daughter a bitch.
This is not a story of weakness. This is a story of survival. Welcome to Unbroken, my story with Tisha. This is where we talk about failures, challenges, and the lessons that shape us. We explore resilience, inner strength, and growth. Today's episode follows Annika, a woman who endured many years of domestic violence within the marriage. She tried to leave once, then twice, and on her third attempt, she didn't just walk out. She walked out forever. Let's begin. Annika, welcome and thank you for being on this episode today.
Thank you.
Are you well?
I am, thank you, yeah.
Good. So I know that you have had a difficult chapter in your life, and that is going to be the topic of discussion today. But if you want to just go back before that chapter started and talk a bit about your childhood, how you grew up, where you grew up, and that environment.
Sure, okay. So I grew up in the Midlands, so for most of my life, especially my childhood. So I'm one of 5 siblings, got a brother and 3 sisters. Grew up with parents, grandparents, close-knit family. We're a Sikh family, so we're quite closely linked, and we have like uncles, aunties and things like that. So had a really nice childhood growing up. Obviously, so we were in quite a strict household. My dad was quite strict when we were growing up, but I think having daughters, that makes, like the dads were quite strict in those days.
Yes.
We used to have long hair and things like that, like most Sikh girls our age back in those days.
So
yeah.
A very religious household as well?
No, I wouldn't say very religious. So my mum was more religious, but my dad wasn't as religious. Okay. But yeah, I think just a bit of a strict household, I would say.
Yeah. And did you do your graduation as well? So were you well read and well studied?
No. So to be honest with you, so when I was younger, I dropped out of university. I just decided that I didn't want to continue studying, and I just started working instead. Yeah, and then I got married quite early. So I got married when I was 23. Had my first child when I was 24, and that was an arranged marriage.
How did this marriage come about?
So my parents tried to introduce me to quite a few different guys, as they used to in those days. It was always going to be an arranged marriage because that's what my sister had before me and things like that. So I was fine with them introducing me with people, and obviously they always gave me an option to say no as well. So I wasn't forced into marriage or anything like that. But yeah, so with this guy, we just saw him at somebody else's house. And, he seemed fine, and, we both said yes. And then before you knew it, we were about to get married. And then I only actually met him that very once. I didn't meet him again after that, before we got married. So other than the initial meeting, there was no physical meeting between us. That wasn't because I didn't want it. I would have liked to have met him and got to know him, but he was always a bit hesitant about meeting before we got married. So it was just that one initial meeting, and I think we got married fairly quickly as well. Within 6 to 9 months, I'd say, of the initial meeting, the marriage actually took place, and it was a huge Sikh wedding, as Sikh weddings are. I'm from a big family. He's also from quite a big family as well. So yeah.
So did you at least used to speak on the phones during this time, or?
A couple of times we spoke on the phone, and then we did have arguments over the phone. And I guess, now in hindsight, obviously those were red flags. The fact that he didn't used to want to meet in person, the fact that we used to argue over the phone. But I think his mum tried to keep the connection quite stable between us. So like his mum used to ring me quite often before we got married, and she talked to me about stuff. But, obviously in hindsight, those are red flags, aren't they? The fact that the interaction wasn't with him, or, the fact that he didn't want to meet me. I think maybe, in hindsight, maybe he was scared that he wouldn't be able to keep up this facade, yeah.
And then what happened?
And then we got married. So like I said, I got married when I was 23, got pregnant fairly quickly after I was married. So had my first child when I was 24, had a baby boy. And initially, things were quite good. So my husband at the time, he used to work for his dad. His dad had a family business, and he used to work for his dad and his brothers. Everything was fine. He'd go out to work. He'd come back. I mean, he used to drink a lot from the very early days. So I'm guessing, well, he would have been a drinker before he got married, but obviously I didn't really know any of that at the time. And his brothers used to drink quite a lot as well, but I never really thought anything of it. But then over time, I kind of realised that he did have problems with alcohol, and obviously that's something which I realised over time of being with him. And then quite often he used to get quite angry about things. So his anger wasn't always when he was drunk. So that's one of the things, like most people, it's when they're angry, when they're drunk, and then you can say, well, you know what, the anger that he had was alcohol induced, but that wasn't always the case with him.
Was he just a very angry person?
I'd say yeah. I'm not sure. He might even have had mental health issues that have just never been diagnosed. I just don't know. I'd say he was a very unique character. He used to not only have anger issues with me, it used to be even with members of my family, members of his own family. So other people realised what he was like as well. But I think in terms of my family always thought, well, you know what, he's like this with us, but it's fine because with his wife, with his kids, he's fine, kind of thing.
But he wasn't.
He wasn't. No.
Were you staying in a joint family, or did you have a nuclear family?
So initially we lived with the in-laws, but then we didn't live with them for very long. Quite shortly after we got married, we moved into our own house, which was literally a few doors down from the in-laws.
So they didn't see anything that was happening on a day-to-day basis with you?
They did, because to be honest with you, so I was married for 7 years, basically. I was married for 7 years. Because they lived only a few doors down, they used to see quite a lot of what he was like with me anyway.
Okay.
And even though I had my first son when I was 24 and then went on to have a daughter as well. So there's 3 years between the two kids. And then quite often I used to go to his parents for support or help when I needed it, because I had nowhere else to turn to. I didn't really want to tell my family what I was going through, because I didn't really think that they would be able to help me, and I didn't really want them to know what I was going through. But his parents, obviously, they knew what I was going through. His sisters knew what I was going through. His sister, and his brothers knew what I was going through, because quite often I would call on them saying, this has happened now, or he's doing this now. He was a very violent and aggressive man. He had, he used to smash things up in the house. He'd damage his own things in his own house, not thought of the cost of replacing things. There was one time when he broke the banister in the stairs, or he'd kick the mirror off the car, and they're our own things, anyone else's belongings that he's damaging, but he had no care in the world of these things.
You said that he had a problem with alcohol. Was alcohol a normal thing in your house? Not abuse of alcohol, but people would enjoy alcohol at certain times in the year for celebrations or parties or whatever. Did you have that in your house at all before you got married?
I did, yeah. Because obviously, so alcohol, it's, I've seen alcohol growing up all my life. My dad's always drank, my brother's always drank. I've seen alcohol all throughout my childhood, because, my own dad and everyone drank. But I think it's when the anger comes with it or the aggression comes with it. Because obviously if someone's angry without a drink, then it's different. But when they're angry with a drink, it's quite often different. It's a different
Yeah.
rage. It's a different, they don't have that control over themselves, do they?
Yeah. So you got married when you were 23, and now you've moved in with your in-laws. It's a house which is quite full, I'm assuming.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. What was it like in the first few days and weeks after getting married?
Initially, it was really hard because I think when you leave your own family, as a girl, when you leave your own family and you move in, you get married, especially because I didn't really know him very well. I didn't know his parents very well. It was very difficult because you're leaving everything behind, aren't you, as a girl, when you get married. So that was really difficult, and I found it quite difficult to adjust and feel settled in that home environment. But then his family were also quite strict as well. I mean, like like the girls used to wear like Indian suits, and they used to have their head covered and things like that. And they were things that I wasn't used to, because even though at the beginning I did say that I grew up in quite a strict household, that wasn't the kind of household we grew up in. We wore English clothes and things like that. So it was difficult, and it's hard to adjust and settle when you get married anyway. And I think especially because I didn't really know him very well, I think it was quite difficult, made it all that more difficult.
Did you bond at all with each other?
We did, yeah. I mean, obviously the love was there because obviously I was with him for such a long time. So I'm not going to say I didn't love him, because then that wouldn't be true. And obviously I've got 2 amazing children out of the marriage. So, it wasn't a complete, right off from the very beginning. He was I would describe him as a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde character. He was very loving, very caring, but then he had this flip character, which was an absolute like a monster, someone really horrible.
What was that first thing that happened that shocked you after you got married?
One of the first things that I remember is once, so this was when I had my first son. He was only small. He was like a baby, and he was on the floor, and then it was time for his feeding. So my husband at the time, he came home from work, and then I asked him to feed the baby, and he's like, no, you feed him. And I'm like, I'm tired, it's a baby. I've been like on my feet all the day kind of thing. Can you just feed him? I gave the bottle and everything to him and just said, can you feed him?
Yeah.
And he turned around and he just slapped me so hard. And at that point, I'd had a cartilage piercing, and the cartilage piercing fell out because I think just from the force of the slap, but I wasn't expecting it. And I think that's the thing that got me, the fact that I wasn't expecting it.
That was the first time he was violent towards you?
Yeah.
And this was a year or so into the marriage?
14, 15 months into the marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was all right until then? I mean, you might have had arguments and stuff, but
obviously you always have arguments and disagreements, but other than that, nothing majorly that I thought, oh my gosh, kind of thing.
After that first time then, how did things change between the two of you?
He was fine. I mean, he was quite, like you quite often hear about these, these men who are aggressive and things like that. They will lash out and then they're apologetic the next day, and and everything's hunky-dory. And obviously, you've got a family with them. You don't want a failed marriage. Obviously everyone wants that fairy tale wedding, don't they? Fairy tale life. So you kind of like just accept it and just hope that, that's it. It's not going to happen again.
Why did you not tell your parents and your family about it?
I don't think I wanted them to worry about what I was going through. My mum's always been a worrier. I think maybe I thought that, it's just a one-off and everything will be okay and I can cope, maybe.
Do you think your upbringing in any way affected how much you tolerated in this marriage?
I think so, yeah. I think maybe deep down I did tolerate an awful lot in this marriage, and in hindsight I do think that, I don't know, maybe I didn't know that my family would support me the way that they did when I finally did walk away, and maybe that's why I tolerated so much as well. Because I think it's difficult, especially when like you're Indian and you're from like an Indian household and you're quite a strict upbringing. We didn't have divorce in our family at that time. You heard about divorce in other families, but it never happened in our house, kind of thing.
And probably when you do hear about divorce happening in other families, that's spoken with a bit of a judgment.
Yeah,
that's oh my God, look at them, they're divorced.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be labelled the same way, I suppose.
That's right, yeah.
Isn't
and I think
it?
having kids makes a huge difference as well, because obviously nobody wants the kids to be, nobody wants kids, affected by things like this, a broken marriage and things like that, because obviously it's so hard to pick up the pieces afterwards.
Annika, tell me, was it a very regular thing that was happening in your marriage, that you were getting violence from your then husband? Or was it only when he was drunk or not happy or tired?
There was quite often some form of abuse, whether it was physical or emotional or even just threats. I think it was always there in some shape or form. And obviously there were periods of time when everything was fine and, he was so loving and so caring and babe this, darling this. But, that's how they kind of like trap you, isn't it?
That's what stops you from leaving, because you always think that, okay, this bad has happened. Now they've come and apologized and they've made up for it by giving flowers and chocolates or a holiday or whatever. And okay, now it's not going to become bad again. But then it does, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this was happening in your life. For 7 years it happened in your life.
There was always something or other, whether he was like throwing stuff at me. I could be walking across the room and he'd had a drink and he'd just like throw something at me, like the remote control or the car keys, or just throw something at my head or something. There was always...
Why?
I don't know. I guess it's a power thing. I honestly don't know. Maybe a power thing. Maybe it's because he could. I don't know.
What were your emotions like in those 7 years when you were with him? Did you have a change of personality as well?
I did, yeah. I think I slowly started to withdraw. So I lost contact with my friends after I got married. Initially, when I first got married, I stayed in contact with a couple of friends from school, and then over time you kind of like lose contact with them because
life takes over.
Yeah, life takes over, and you don't really want to keep telling them all the bad stuff you're going through.
Yeah.
There was a point where I used to hate going to any party, wedding or function or anything like that, because I knew that something would happen. If something didn't happen then with him, then it would happen on the way home or when I got home. I knew that there would be something, and I just started to dread any gathering or social event where we were both attending together.
Why did your in-laws not step in? I mean, did they step in to help you? What support did they provide to you?
They did try. I'm not going to say that they didn't try to help me. They did try to help me. They did used to try to intervene. They used to try to support me, and they say, come and stay the night here, just leave him, let him go home and go to sleep, you stay here with the kids. And they did do that for an awful long time, if I'm honest with you. But then, what life is that for me that, I can't even go home with my own kids a few doors down because I don't know what he's going to do, and then I have to stay, in my in-laws' spare bedroom with the kids and stupid things like that. It's not really a great way to be living, even though, I did rely on the in-laws quite a lot for that support network, which I didn't have in my own house.
Physical violence is almost quite easy to notice and to know and to identify, but maybe mental violence or emotional violence is sometimes harder for people to really pin and say, actually, this is emotional violence. What are some of those things that happened with you which could give definition to an emotional violence?
Threats of violence, threats of what he was going to do to me if I ever left him, what he was going to do to my family members. I'd say it was those kind of things, because then afterwards, when I did eventually leave him, I'd be like, oh, well, I'd say to my family members, oh, but he's going to do this, he's going to try and kill me, he's going to try and do this. And for an awful long time I did live in fear, because thinking that, what, he's going to carry out those acts. But, my family used to always reassure me that no, it was all just talk with him.
A lot of the times, and I'm not saying always, because we have heard of stories where some people do, actually walk their threats through. But a lot of the times it's all bravado as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But I think when you're in that moment and you're that person, even though I do class myself as quite a strong person, but when I was living that life, I was literally scared of my own life.
Yeah.
Scared that he was going to do something to me. But the violent, the threats with him, they haven't ended even to this day. If something happens, he will threaten me. He'll say he's going to burn down my house, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. But now I've just learned to live with the fact that it's all just talk with him.
Yeah. Children. So you had your son. Obviously, you had trouble in the marriage life. He wasn't treating you with any respect or love.
Yeah.
What was he like with your son? And then you also had a daughter. How many years after your son was your daughter born?
Okay, so initially with the son, he was absolutely the doting father. I think he was very old fashioned in that, a boy meant, oh my god, a boy. He was like from that kind of mentality and that kind of, thinking. So initially he was like really absolutely, oh my god, a boy, a boy. But then it turned into, oh, he has to be this, he has to do that, he has to be strong, he has to be this, he has to be that. And that was quite difficult. And like say if like, your child hurts themselves, obviously as a mother your instinct is to protect, whereas he was like, no, you have to let him, he has to get used to this, he has to, be able to carry his own, and he has to be tough, he has to be strong, he has to fight back, he has to do this, he has to do that. I had a daughter 3 years later. Even though he does love my daughter and he will always love my daughter, he has got that differentiation between a boy and a girl, and that's something which I saw quite early on in the way that he was, and even the way that he is today.
What sort of differences did you see?
That old-fashioned mentality where like a boy is like, oh my god, a boy is absolutely amazing, put the boy on the pedestal, whereas the girl's just like there kind of thing.
That must have been quite difficult to see.
Yeah,
as a mother.
Yeah, because obviously as a mother, all of your children are equal, aren't they?
Yeah, my kids often ask me, Mum, who do you love more?
Yeah.
I'm like Coco the dog. Yeah. Okay. What made you decide to leave? What had happened?
So I tried to leave on 3 different occasions. So the first occasion was when he'd got really angry and he was drunk, and I can't even remember what happened. I know he kicked me. We were in like our living room and his mum was there, so his mum saw him kick me and she didn't say anything to him. He was just really angry over something. I can't even remember what it was now. And he used to quite often threaten to ring my dad. He's like, I'm going to tell your dad, I'm going to tell your dad. And like I was doing something wrong. Whereas for me, I just didn't want my family to know what I was going through. I don't think I wanted them to. I don't know, I didn't want them to worry about me. I didn't want them to know what I was dealing with. So every time I used to go back to my parents and everything, they'd think that everything was fine between us. They know that obviously he acts out with other people, but they always just thought, well, you know what, he's fine with his wife, he's fine with his kids, so that's the main thing. Yeah, so the first time, he actually got really drunk and he actually rang my dad, and he rang my dad and he's like, your daughter isn't happy here. He'd been drinking anyway. I can't remember what the argument was over that day. And then, yeah, so he said, your daughter isn't happy here. And then I don't even know what my dad said to him that day. But then what he doesn't know is that I then rang my dad the very next day, early in the morning. And I just said, you know what? I don't know what to do here, I think, I can't remember what I even said to my dad. All I know is that my dad said, just pack your bags. We could have come to get you. And then that day my dad came. It was my dad, my uncle, my mum and my brother. And I'd already packed a bag because my dad had already said to me, pack your bag. And in the bag was just stuff for the 2 kids. I didn't pack any of my stuff. It was just one bag with a few of their essentials. So at that time my daughter was still in nappies. She had a dummy. She was less than 1 year old at that point. And my son was at nursery, so I think he must have been about 3 years old, 2.5, 3 years old.
Yeah.
My mum said that she'd never seen me like that before. And she was sitting next to me on the sofa and she was like, I could feel you trembling. So that day, like, my dad tried to speak to him and his parents were there as well. And they just said that he needs to sort himself out. And he was drunk that day when he came as well. So I think he must have got up and started drinking the next day as well. And then they said that they were going to take me and obviously they were going to take the kids as well. And he wouldn't let them take my son.
He was okay with you taking the daughter?
Yeah. So that day, he hit my uncle that day when we were about to leave. But he'd been violent towards my family before, so his violence, that's what I mean. So everyone knew about his violence, his family knew about his violence, he's been violent towards his family, he's been violent towards my family by this point as well. And he hit my uncle that day and he came at us with a knife, which is why we ended up leaving that day without my son.
I'm so sorry.
So we left that day.
That must have broken you as well, to leave your son in an environment you know is not safe. Was your son back from the nursery by then?
He was, yeah. So the kids were home. It was on a weekend that day.
You left then?
Yeah, so we had to leave because he came at us with a knife, and so we left. Obviously, I had my daughter with me. All she had was her dummy that was in her mouth, and that was it. So we left that day, and then my son was still going to nursery, so I used to ring the nursery every day to find out how he was. And I think I did that for about 3 or 4 days, and then the holidays were coming up from the nursery. So I used to ring the nursery and find out, and they said he was fine and that everything was, his dad was dropping him off and everything was fine. They didn't notice a difference in him or anything. But then, because obviously I knew the holidays were coming up, I had to go back because I knew he wouldn't let me take my son. So then he came, and obviously my son came with him, and along with that came all the promises of how he was going to change and everything. So I went back.
How far is your parents' house from your marital home?
So my parents live, so it was only an hour, so it's not far.
Okay, but not next door either?
No.
Okay, so it's not like you could go and see him every day?
No, and to be honest with you, I think I would have been too scared to do that because I would have been too scared to do that.
Yeah. No, I absolutely hear you. That fear can paralyze somebody. Were you working at that time?
No, I think I was on maternity leave at that time.
Okay. So really young kid. Your daughter must have been...
Yeah, she was young, yeah. She was still in nappies and she had a dummy and stuff. So she was less than a year old at that time.
Was your ex-husband working as well?
Not at that point, no.
So he was not... So how did you run the house?
So I used to get maternity leave.
Pay?
So I had maternity pay, and then we had rental income. So that used to help cover the costs of the house.
But obviously he's not diverting any of his energies in any productive work anywhere.
No. So that was the first time I left him, and then I went back and everything was fine for a while. He even gave up. And that's the other thing, he used to go through periods when he used to stop drinking as well. So that's why I know it wasn't always alcohol related. But yes, I went back and then he was fine for a while, and then slowly it dipped into the same cycle again. The second time I left him was when we'd been to a hospital appointment in relation to my son. The doctors had said that they wanted to put my son on some steroids, and he was adamant that he didn't want him to have steroids because obviously it's medication, and he didn't want him to have it. And even though the doctors were saying that he should take the steroids for a short period of time, he didn't want him to have it, and because of that he got really angry and he was drunk again. And I just remember he was hitting me, and I was lying in bed, and I was actually in bed in my son's bed with both of the kids at the time, and he was punching me through the duvet and stuff. And then he was so drunk he actually passed out and fell asleep mid all of this going on. And it was late at night. I don't even know what time it was, and I just got both the kids, got just a laundry basket that was nearby, threw some of the kids' clothes in there, and just drove to. And then on the way I just rang my mum and I just said, I'm going to go.
How long was that after the first time you left?
I don't even know, to be honest with you. Maybe about a year later.
What kept you enduring this?
Fear of what he would do to me, what he would do to my family, and also the kids. I didn't want them to be brought up in a household where the parents were separated, because I think those things have a huge impact on the kids.
But is it not better to be in a non-violent environment with separate parents than being in a situation where...
I don't know, maybe I just thought he would change, but yeah, he didn't change. And then the third time I left him...
Why did you come back though? Because now you left with both the children.
Yeah, so this time I did live with both the children, and I even settled my son in a nursery in everything, and I was, starting my life again. And then he just persuaded me that he would change, and that I needed to give him another chance, and that he would change this time. He was struggling on his own, and that I needed to give him that chance. I couldn't take the kids away from him. They were his kids as well. That was the reason why I went back the second time.
Did your parents try to give their suggestions on whether you should or you should not go back the second time? What about the in-laws? Were they involved in this at all?
Yeah, so obviously they tried to persuade me to go back as well, because they were saying that obviously they were their kids as well, the grandkids and things like that.
Then what happened?
Then I went back again, and then same kind of thing for a while. He was fine, and then slowly just that same cycle again. That same kind of aggression, that same kind of abuse. emotional, physical, whatever. It all just started again. And then the third time I left him was the final time, when I realised that the in-laws didn't actually have my back as much as I thought they had my back. And I think that was the thing that made me leave in the end. Like I said, so his violence wasn't only towards me, his aggression wasn't only towards me, it was also to members of his own family as well as members of my family as well. By this time, like, his parents and his siblings, they all knew what he was like, and they all knew that he wasn't going to change, because he was violent and aggressive towards his siblings as well, his brothers. And I remember, so he'd been drinking and he was arguing with his parents, because he used to argue with his parents quite a lot as well. Both of his parents used to drink as well, that's the other thing. And then one time things were getting out of control, and then I rang his brother and I said, you know what, they're arguing. And at this point we were living next door to them. And
your in-laws?
Yeah. And I said, they're arguing, and his brother was like, well, you know, what can I do? They do this all the time, then tomorrow they'll be fine. Because that's literally what used to happen. They used to have like huge arguments, and then the next day, you know, everything would be hunky-dory and the parents would just forgive him and everything would be fine. And they were like, well, you know, this happens all the time, it's, you know, they'll be fine tomorrow, there's nothing we can do, just leave them to it, kind of thing.
Was this in your house or their house?
It was in their house, but we used to have like entry into their house through the back door, through the back garden.
Oh, so you were literally next door this time?
Yeah, literally right next door, yeah. He'd been drinking, his parents had been drinking, and then he started breaking things in their house, because that's the other thing, he used to break stuff. Not quite often it was in our own house, but this time he was breaking stuff in their house. I don't even know what happened, because obviously I was back at my own house because I had the kids there as well, and every once in a while I'd go across next door and try and calm things down, and then realise that I couldn't, and then I'd come home and start like ringing his brother or ringing his sister and saying, you know, you need to come because I don't know what to do. But, you know, none of them wanted to come because they got sick of coming all the time. I know he was breaking stuff in their house. Next thing I know, the police were called. So the mother-in-law had gone to a neighbour and complained. She said that me and her husband were breaking stuff in her house, and that me and her husband were hitting her. So the mother-in-law said this about her own husband and me. And then the police came, and the father-in-law got arrested and I got arrested. Like I said, so she was drunk, he was drunk, and my ex-husband was also drunk as well. When the police came, my ex-husband just ran off. We used to live opposite a park. He just ran off into the park. And he did say the next day that he saw me, that he knew that I got arrested, and he just watched me while I got arrested. I got arrested, I got taken to the police station. The sister-in-law came and she took the kids to her house. And I remember when we ended up at the police station, I walked in and my father-in-law was sitting there, and he was so drunk and so out of it, and he looked at me and he's like, what are you doing here? And I said, she said that I was doing it as well.
But you were in your home?
I was in my own home, and I was
with
the only
your
one who hadn't drank or hadn't done anything. But she'd said my name and she'd said his name. So because she was drunk, we got kept in overnight because they couldn't interview her because she was intoxicated. So because of that, we spent a night in a cell, and then we were released the next morning. And then when we were released the next morning, I went home, and then my ex-husband now, obviously he was just asleep in the bed when we got there, and then he didn't say anything, but then he did say to me that he saw me get arrested because he'd watched from across the road. And he just let me get arrested when he knew I had nothing to do with it. I had nothing, you know, I wasn't even involved in anything. So that day my daughter was supposed to go to a birthday party. It was somebody's birthday at her nursery. And she was supposed to go to a birthday party. She was all ready to go to the birthday party, and I was going to drop her off. And then my ex-husband was drinking again. I don't even know where he just used to go out, take the car and get alcohol and drink. He saw nothing of drinking and driving. He used to do it all the time. And he went out, got more alcohol, and then he was drinking, and then she was supposed to go to a party, and then he went out and I didn't know where he was, and then his mom was like, let's go and find him. And that's the other thing we used to do. He'd just go out and take the car and just be God knows where, and then we'd have to go and find him to bring him home, kind of thing. So then we found him, and then we brought him home, and then he had an argument with me, and then he went off again. And then this time when he went off, I just got the kids, went to a house a few doors down, and I just asked them to call me a taxi. That was the third time I left him, and that was when I didn't get back, because I knew that when he came back he was just going to carry on arguing with me, because obviously he'd gone out for more alcohol. And I thought, why am I waiting for him to come back to do that again? So that day that I left, I literally had nothing. I had the 2 kids. One was 3 and one was 7, and just my handbag, and that was it. Didn't even know where to go because my parents weren't here at that time. They were on holiday in India. So I didn't want to go to their house because my sisters were there, and I didn't want him to come there and cause trouble. So I rang my brother, and I just said, I'm in a taxi, I'm coming. They said, will you pay for the taxi? And he said, yeah, come. So when I got to my brother's house, I told them what happened. I'd been arrested when I hadn't even done anything. And then they took me to my uncle's house because we were scared he was going to come. So they took me to my uncle's house, and then I stayed there for a while. And then my older sister came with her husband, and she lives hours away. She came that same day. She took me to her house. So I stayed there with the kids. I stayed there for a few days just to clear my head and everything. And my parents were still in India and they didn't know what had happened. And then my uncle helped me. He helped me get a solicitor. And then we filed an injunction so he couldn't come anywhere near us because I was so scared. And then we started the divorce proceedings, and that was the final time. And then I didn't give in this time. When he tried to persuade me to go back, I didn't give in because I realised that I couldn't even rely on my in-laws anymore. Because before they'd always try to help me. They'd say, like, stay here, you know, we'll look after you, we'll look after the kids as much as we can. But when she did that to me, I realised that she wasn't on my side. And I didn't have anyone there.
So literally every support that you could think of was just gone after that incident.
Oh, yeah.
There was no support at all for you in that house.
No. And the other thing is, my son was getting older, so he was 7 now. And he was seeing his dad act like this. And I remember there was one time his dad was telling him to swear at me, call me a bitch, call my daughter a bitch. And my son didn't want to do it, but he was so scared that I had to say it. But I didn't want my son thinking that is normal behaviour. And to see his dad being that way and thinking that he could be that way, because I didn't want that. And that was the other reason why I left, because I thought I can't have him growing up thinking that this is normal.
What gave you that final strength to move out, but not just to move out, but not to go back? What had broken in you? What had strengthened in you?
I think it was just knowing that I was really actually all on my own there.
Yeah.
You know, that there was literally no one there for me.
What impact had, your son was 7, and that's quite an old child, if you know what I mean. They're old enough to notice things and observe what's happening and make sense of what is happening. How had all of these years impacted him and your daughter as well to an extent?
Quite badly, to be honest with you, because obviously my son especially knew and he saw an awful lot of what happened, whereas my daughter was 3 when we left the final time, so she was a lot younger. But I think more with my son, I think he obviously had some of the trauma himself as well, because sometimes the anger was directed at the kids as well. It wasn't always at me. So I think even they realised that their dad was someone who was very unpredictable. So I think it plays a huge part in them and what they become and how they are. So when I left, and we filed the injunction so he couldn't come anywhere near us, and then we went through court proceedings. There was a fact-finding hearing where I had to literally stand there and talk about all the stuff he'd done to me right in front of him, which was really hard. But one of the things that the judge actually said at that fact-finding hearing is that she could see that he was trying to intimidate me even then. Even in front of the judge, she could see that. For me to see that other people were actually seeing what he was like, that helped me to deal with things, because quite often he'd put on this act in front of everyone else. But yeah, I think the impact on the kids is quite huge. They didn't see their dad for quite a long time because of what happened. The court said that he couldn't see the kids, and at one point he was in jail, so he couldn't see them at that point anyway. Then eventually he managed to see them in a contact centre, which was quite good, but then obviously then the courts do always eventually agree that the dad can see the kids no matter what he's done. And that was really difficult, because initially my son didn't want to go, but then over time he brought their love, kind of with gifts and things like that. He brought his way back into their lives.
Kids are very forgiving as well.
They are, yeah.
So it's not necessarily the gifts that lured your son back. It's probably, he's my dad, isn't it? And I probably need to give him another chance. Kids are very loving and very forgiving.
They are, yeah.
Yeah. What about your daughter? Does she remember anything? Did it have any impact on her?
She didn't really remember anything, to be honest with you, but when their dad came back into their lives, obviously things happened then. So they still continued receiving some of the trauma, or seeing the effects of the trauma of how he was with other people, his anger towards other people. So they have seen that throughout their lives, to be honest with you.
Did you ever blame yourself for anything that was happening to you at any point during the 7-8 years you were with him?
I think probably, yeah, especially at the beginning, maybe thinking that, you know what, maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe the food I was cooking wasn't nice, or, maybe, little things like that where, like the arguments were over, look at the food you've made, or why can't you do this, or why can't you do that.
So now you have walked away for the third time. Your parents come back as well from their holiday. What was their reaction? How did they support you going forward?
So they were obviously quite shocked when they found out what had happened, because they had no idea. But then my uncle was very supportive, and so was my auntie, and they, helped them to, understand what was happening and everything I was going through and what I'd been through. So they actually did like all the hard work for me by telling them everything, whereas I didn't have to do all that. Obviously when they came back, then the in-laws started to try to like build bridges and get everything back to how it was, and my dad just said, no, not this time. You can give someone a chance, but this is getting ridiculous now. So, and then they were very supportive. Obviously they supported me financially, they gave me somewhere to live, and they supported me until I was back up on my feet.
Were you working at this point, or were you on...
When I left, I was working, yeah.
For the third time, when you had left him?
Because he didn't used to work, I used to work. So once the maternity leave finished with the kids, with the first child, then I went back to work, and then that's what I did with the second child as well.
I'm assuming your work was near where you were in So how did you travel then? Did you just have to travel to your work?
No, so when I left that third time, I gave up my job. I literally a clean slate.
Clean slate.
Walked away from my job, everything.
And that's where your uncle helped you financially as well?
My dad, yeah.
Your dad,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But my sisters were also very supportive as well. My brother was as well. And I think that's what makes the whole transition and everything so much more easier for me. The fact that I did have a very supportive family who did look after me. They really did help me. They helped me get back up on my feet. Like advice, support, everything. And obviously also to help with the kids as well.
Did your children, especially your son, he would have noticed the difference, because obviously you've left your home, he's not seeing his dad every day. Did he ever ask you, why are we here? Why are we not with dad anymore? When are we going back?
Yes, it took them a while to understand what was happening. He was very scared initially. He was wet in the bed at the age of 7 because of everything that he'd been through. So I think it took him a long time to adjust and realise that they were actually safe now.
I can't even imagine how a child that young would feel knowing they're unsafe. Their mother is unsafe as well, pretty much every day, every night when they're going to bed. And this would be a normal thing for them, I suppose, to have violence in the house, to have shouting and screaming in the house, to see things being thrown and flung across the room, things being broken, dad being drunk. What was the legal system like for you? How did you navigate that? Did you have a good solicitor? What were some of the challenges you came through there?
So I was quite lucky, to be honest with you, because my dad supported me financially in terms of getting a good solicitor. So obviously he paid all the solicitor's fees and everything like that. My ex-husband wasn't working at the time, so he was getting legal aid. So for him it was so easy, but obviously we paid thousands and thousands in legal fees just to get everything finalised, get everything, separate completely. What
difference did you see in yourself from after you had been married to when you had left him? What had changed in you?
I think I would describe it as when I was married, I was always on edge. You just never knew what was going to happen. Like you could just flip like a switch. Whereas afterwards it's being more relaxed.
Did you feel like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders?
Yeah.
Even with 2 kids, even with a lot of uncertainty that might bring for you with this step, you still felt lighter?
I did, yeah. It took me a while to obviously get there. Initially I was really scared, thinking, what, he's going to come, he's going to, one of the threats he'd given me, he's going to hurt me, he's going to try and kill me, he's going to do this, or he's going to do something to me. Initially I was just really scared, but I think over time I just realised that he wasn't going to do anything. It was all just empty threats. just to keep me under his control.
How long did it take you legally for you to be separated and divorced?
I think it took about 2 or 3 years in the end.
And because there were children involved, was there another process you had to follow or go through for child custody and
No,
or was that all part of the
it
divorce
was all part
proceedings?
of it, yeah.
Divorce proceedings, okay. And were you then
Well, no, sorry. So the divorce obviously was completely separate, and then obviously the children thing, that is...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how
So
long?
that took longer.
That took longer, yeah. And did he have equal rights to see the children and be with them? And you can.
So initially he didn't know. Initially there was no contact for him because he used to have drug and alcohol testing to prove that he was fit to see the children. So he used to have regular drug and alcohol testing, and then we went through court cases after court cases, and then eventually he did get to see the kids. Initially it was through a contact centre, but then over time it was unsupervised contact.
Did he pay anything towards children's maintenance?
No, not towards their maintenance, no.
So
He used to occasionally buy the children things,
Yeah.
but yeah, no
Occasionally.
regular maintenance, yeah.
So you have brought up your children on your own,
Yeah.
by yourself. So now you are legally divorced.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And then, so I was divorced for a few years, and then in 2011 I met somebody, and he also had a son, and then we got married.
How long were you seeing him for before you decided, yes, I can trust somebody else again? Because this episode would have broken something in you as well.
Yeah.
And then trusting somebody else with marriage, it's a big
Yeah.
step.
It is, yeah. To be honest with you, I think it took me probably years to really give my all, because I think when you've been hurt like that and you've been through that, I think it puts you on edge. You kind of like protect yourself automatically. So I think it did take me years to actually get over that, and probably I was never ever fully over it, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's something that stays with you forever. It
Yeah.
changes you as a person,
Mm.
and you can never just let it go.
Yeah.
And is this person from your background as well, or
He is,
culturally
yeah,
from your
yeah,
background as
yeah,
well?
yeah.
How did your parents react and your wider family react to you wanting to get married again?
They were fine with it, to be honest with you. So I think for my dad, because like I said, he is like quite traditional in quite a lot of ways. I think for him, just the fact that I'd met somebody who, you know, would take me on, and obviously the fact that I had kids as well, that's not an easy thing for people to take on board and to accept. So I think he was just very happy that I'd found somebody.
Yeah. How long have you been married now?
14 years.
14 years.
Yeah.
And happily married.
Yes. Yeah, obviously life has its ups and downs. You know, everyone has their arguments
course.
and things like that.
Of
But that's life, isn't it?
Yeah. You need to have some arguments in a marriage,
Yeah,
otherwise
exactly,
where's
yeah.
the fun as well? Healthy arguments.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How old were your children when you got married again?
So my son was 10 and my daughter was 7.
Did they have a opinion?
They did meet with him first, because obviously I wanted them to be accepting of this and to take it on board. So by the time I'd got married again, they still weren't having any interaction with their dad, and that was the other thing. I wanted them to have that father figure in their lives, because at that point, once I'd left their dad, they hadn't had a father figure in their lives. So for me, I wanted them to have a good role model, someone that would be there for the kids as well, so they don't only have me.
How do you raise your children from the experiences you've had in life? What values do you try and imbibe in them? Or did you try to, because now they're adults, isn't it?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. So how did you raise them up after you had left your husband?
So I think for me it was about them knowing the value of life, obviously being appreciative of things, being independent as well, and just working hard. I think having that, you know, that strong work ethic. So when I was a single parent, I was also studying as well. So when I started rebuilding my life again, I was working part-time, obviously doing the school run and everything, but then I was also studying in the evenings. So I think for me, the fact that they saw me going through all that, the fact that they saw me trying to better myself, that hopefully that they think that, you know what, we can do something with our lives as well.
Your children are grown up now.
They are.
Have they flown the nest? Are they doing their own thing now?
No, they're all still very much with us.
Yeah.
So the youngest is 21, My oldest is 24, and then my stepson is 23.
Okay. And do they all get on with each other?
They do, yeah.
More or less.
Yeah, as much as siblings
As much
can.
as
Yeah.
siblings can.
Yeah.
And do you think your children found that father figure in your current husband?
I think they did, yeah. I think it was very hard for them, though, especially for my son when his dad did come back into his life. I think he found it more difficult having the two dads kind of thing. I think he found that very difficult.
How did you navigate that, or how did you help him navigate that? Or did you just
I think it was challenging, to be honest with you, and I think it's probably still challenging today. I think blended families is very difficult. Obviously, it's it's not one of those things anyone really wants to have to deal with, but sometimes life just puts you in
situations.
Exactly. Yeah.
Are you proud of yourself today?
I am, yes, definitely.
What are you proud of?
I'm proud of the fact that I managed to rebuild my life, the fact that everything I went through with my ex-husband, that I didn't let him break me. And I think he would have loved to have broken me, and for my life to have been an absolute mess. But I think I'm proud of the fact that I did rebuild my life. I educated myself, I worked hard, I've got a good job, I was able to support the children and be independent as well. That was one of the other things I always said to myself, that the day that I walked away has to be a day when I can be independent and stand up on my own 2 feet. If I can't stand up on my own 2 feet, then I didn't want to walk away, because I wanted to be able to stand up on my own 2 feet. For me, that was very important.
Having gone through this episode, it does break a person. Did that have an impact in your professional life? Were you always doubting yourself at work, maybe not going for that promotion, maybe not standing up for yourself, maybe when you should have or could have? Did that have an impact at all?
I think it did, yeah. I think when you've had these kind of setbacks in life, I think it can impact you professionally as well. And I think I wasn't very confident. I know initially when I first started working again, I wasn't very confident. I was just doing what I was told to do, and that was it, not having faith in myself, not believing in myself. Whereas I think over the years that has shifted, and I do have more faith in myself now.
What do you do in your free time? What are your hobbies, or what's your interests?
My interests, okay, I like holidays. So I like travelling, I like seeing different destinations, seeing what's out there in the world. I like reading, just relaxing as well, chilling out, sitting, watching a good series or a good box set or a nice movie.
And you are able to do what you like to do?
Yeah,
now.
That's right, yeah.
On the whole, are you happy where you are now?
I am, yeah. I'm so glad that I had the strength to walk away that third time.
And to stay away.
Yeah.
Annika, tell me one thing. Is there anything your parents could have done different whilst you were growing up that might have prevented you from suffering for so long? Or is there anything parents can do when they're bringing up, especially, well, both, I think, their son or their daughter, that can prevent them from going through such kind of things in life? Take actions sooner.
I think maybe if parents were more openly accepting of the fact that, if things don't work out, come back. Whereas obviously that wasn't really something that people spoke about. They were kind of like wanted you to be happy more than anything in the world. They would rather probably pretend that you are happy and everything is perfect, and she's happy in her own house kind of thing, and just maybe they kind of like live a little in denial as well, because they don't want anything to be wrong, or they don't want the child to come back, because there's so much stigma attached to divorced, or the daughter came back home, and the daughter's got kids and she came back home, who's going to marry her now, things like that. Did
you find that the society labelled you in any way once you did come back? Did you get that feeling at all from your community?
I didn't, if I'm honest with you, but maybe it's because I wasn't looking out for it, or I wasn't bothered by that point. And I think the other thing is, I think quite often when there's divorce, if if the divorce is due to violence, it's more accepting. Whereas if it's due to they just didn't get on or something, then I think maybe that's less accepting or less easy for people to understand.
If there is one message of strength you could give to any of your, of our listeners today, what would that message be?
I think it would be to stand up and have the courage to walk away if you're in a relationship and it's not working, and I think definitely if there's violence involved, I think nobody should have to go through that. Nobody should have to deal with that trauma. They should walk away, and people shouldn't think that because they've got kids they have to stay for the sake of the kids or for the sake of the family. Because like you said to me at the beginning, didn't I make it worse by staying for as long as I did? And obviously I did, didn't I? Yeah.
I do ask all my guests to leave me a positive message that I put on the board behind you, and I collect all of these positive thoughts and messages, and hopefully once my board is full, and I hope it is full, I will be able to share it with everybody. Okay. So if you don't mind, a little positive, something for me or your children, your family, the universe, anybody.
Okay.
Do you want to read it out?
Yeah, well, I can do. It's very easy. It's believe in yourself. You can do it.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think it sums up your life, doesn't it?
Yes.
It was about believing in yourself.
Yeah.
And then just doing what you had to do.
Yeah, and having the faith and knowing that you can actually achieve what you want to achieve. Yeah.
More than the external factors, it was the belief in yourself that had to come first.
Yeah.
That first step had to come from you.
Yeah.
Annika, it has been an emotional journey for you. It has been an incredible journey for you. It has had its very, very lows, and it has had its high as well for you, especially now. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming here and sharing your story, and I hope you always remain happy in your life. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tisha.
Annika's story reminds us that leaving isn't a single moment. It's a process. Strength doesn't always look like walking away the first time. Sometimes it looks like trying again, even when fear tells you not to. If you are listening and see yourself in part of the story, know this. You are not alone. You are not broken. And you are not weak. Help exists. Support exists. And a life beyond survival is possible. Thank you for listening, for holding space, and for bearing witness. Keep choosing yourself. And until next time, stay unbroken.